Hi friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you my May reading wrap up. So in May I had a far more successful month than I did in April. I read 18 books in total and I had a lot of 5-star reads, so I'm really excited to talk about all of the books that I read this month. I feel like I enjoyed so much more of the books I read this month. Even the ones that weren't necessarily 5-star reads, I still really enjoyed. So much better than April. I don't know why that was. I don't know if it was just because I had a lot of time to properly dedicate to the books I was reading. I don't know if it was just because I was picking up quite a few new releases that I was really excited for, and it was also the month that I read my first ever Brandon Sanderson, so that was really exciting, and spoiler alert, he is one of the 5-star reads. Let's kick this off by going into the stats for the month first of all. So across the month of May I read 18 books, and across those 18 books I read a total of 6,441 pages, which breaks down to an average of 207 pages per day, which is really good. I think that is kind of like the average page count that I like to achieve, because reading, as I usually am, 2 books at a time, that breaks down to about 100 pages per book per day, and that is my goal, is always to read 100 pages of each book a day. That doesn't always happen. That 200 pages includes books that I've read in one sitting, etc. You know, that average, it wasn't like that every single day, but having an average of 200 pages ish a day means that I am achieving my goal, which is how I can get through some more NetGalley books, how I can reach my reading goal for the year. So I'm really pleased with that. And having read 18 books in May, that does mean that my total at the end of May for the year was 85 books for the year so far. So I'm really pleased with that, because that means that in order to achieve 100 books read in the year, I only need to read 15 books in June, which I think is doable. So I'm very pleased with that total. Breaking down the formatting of the books, I read 16 novels, 1 graphic novel and 1 novella, or it was like a sort of collection of short stories, but it was a novella. And I also read 11 physical books and 7 ebooks. So ebooks are the ones that I was reading via NetGalley, and I believe that I said it either in my April reading wrap up or in my May TBR that what I wanted to really achieve in May was to read more than 6 NetGalley books, because back when I was starting NetGalley I was doing like 10 a month. I was getting through them, and since I want to say this time last year I've only been doing sort of 5 or 6 a month. So I'm really pleased that I've managed to get up to 7, and I'm hoping, although at the time of filming it doesn't look like it's going to happen in June, but I'm hoping to be able to get it back up to nearer to 10, so 8 or 9 books from NetGalley a month. I'm really pleased with 7 for the month in May. In terms of age categories, we have an even split. I read 9 adult books and 9 YA books, with no middle grade, children's or new adult books read. And I don't even know why I keep including this graph in it, because once again all of the books I read were fiction, to nobody's surprise. So let's break down the genres. I feel like I had a pretty good range of genres this month. I had 1 classic, 2 contemporary, 2 historical, 1 horror, 1 lit fic, 1 mystery, 2 romance, and the highest category was fantasy, with 8 books read in fantasy. And in terms of the ratings, as you can see, it was a good reading month. I had no 1 or 1.5 star reads. I had 2 2-star reads, which isn't great, but when you compare it to the higher ratings, it balances out, it's fine. 1 2.5 star rating, 2 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 4 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 5 5-star reads. 5 in May, when I was struggling to find even 1 in April. That's pretty insane. And I'm very happy with that. Having 5 5-star reads in a month is kind of unheard of for me at the minute. I've become a lot pickier with my 5-star reads lately, and yeah, only having sort of 2, maybe 3 at a push in a month for the past few months. So to have 5, we are so back. Okay, so let's get into the actual books I read. So we'll go once again starting at the bottom with my two-star reads. First of which was What Monstrous Gods by Rosamund Hodge. This is a YA fantasy and it's kind of a Sleeping Beauty retelling. You're following Leah, who is she's training to be a nun, essentially. And in this world, the royal family have been cursed in this castle for, I think it's like 500 years or something. And they've all been asleep, sort of kept asleep, with this massive briar surrounding the castle. And it was created by this evil sorcerer, Reuven. And once in sort of every generation, there is a girl born with the royal gift, which I never worked out what the royal gift exactly was, but whoever was born with the royal gift had to try and break through the briar to wake up the family, kill the sorcerer, break the curse. At the very start of this book, Leah does just that, and it happens within the first 20-30 pages, and then it kind of goes on to this much less interesting plot to do with Leah kind of proving herself that she can be a princess to the queen, who's now awoken, and it was just not that interesting. It didn't really work for me. I really thought that the whole killing the evil sorcerer, breaking through the briar, breaking the curse, I thought that that would be kind of the main plot, or at least would last longer than 20-30 pages. I just don't really understand why it didn't, why that wasn't the main plot. I feel like that would have been much more interesting. There's also a bit of a romance involved, and I feel like based off of the cover, I don't know if it's meant to be a Raylo-inspired romance. I don't know if this was originally a Raylo fanfiction, you know, like The Love Hypothesis, The Hurricane Wars, or if it was just sort of Raylo-inspired, or if it's just what the artist has designed the cover to be like. But the romance didn't work for me. In theory it should have done, but I did not feel the chemistry between them, and I just ended up with the book it just wasn't working for me. So it was a 2-star read, and I was quite sad about that because I was really looking forward to it, but I just really wish that the sorcerer curse plot had lasted a lot longer than it did. And the other 2-star read that I had in May was very sadly Secrets So Deep by Ginny Myers Sane. And I say so sadly because I love Ginny Myers Sane. I really love Dark and Shallow Lies and One Last Breath by this author, so for this to be a 2-star read, it was very upsetting. It was. This follows Avril, who, when she was a child, her mother drowned in the sea, and no one really knows why she ended up going into the sea, but Avril was in the sea with her, and Avril nearly died herself, and she then comes back to this cove to join this theatre group that's being run by this woman who, it turns out, was her mother's best friend. I feel like that's really it. I mean, obviously there's kind of a murder mystery going on, but it was very obvious from the beginning how it was going to play out. And what I really liked about Ginny Myers Sane's other books was the kind of supernatural element that was involved in them. And in this one, it feels like that element just wasn't really considered until kind of the last minute. It's like it tries to have that supernatural element, but it just doesn't really pay off. And that's really sad because in her other books, it works so well how she does a supernatural twist. In this one, the characters just felt stilted, the dialogue was all flat, and the romance was honestly a bit cringeworthy, which I'm so sad to say because I really liked how she did her little bits of romance in her other books. So yeah, I was really, really sad that this was a 2-star read because I consider myself a Ginny Myers Sane stan, but this one just didn't work for me. This was her second book, so I don't know if it was just like second book syndrome. I don't know. I'm still definitely going to be reading whatever she puts out because of how much I love Dark and Shallow Lies and One Last Breath. This one was unfortunately just a fail for me. And the 2.5-star read that I had was Song of the Six Realms by Judy I. Lin. This is a kind of dark Rebecca retelling almost. It's based in East Asian mythology. It follows a girl who is kind of rescued from being a song girl, I think, and she's taken to this manor, but then it turns out to kind of not be all that it seems. But honestly, I could not tell you a single thing that happens in this book. I genuinely could not. It's really gone out of my brain at this point. I don't know if it's a problem with just me and this author, because while I liked A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lin, I really didn't like the second book of that series, and I feel like it was like this with this one. It just felt meh. There was so much world building going on that I feel like this book could have really done with being a duology. It functions as a standalone, and it's kind of in the opposite to how I feel about Magic Steeped in Poison. That was a duology that I felt like should have been a standalone, and this is a standalone that I feel like should have been a duology, because there's so much world building going on, so much thrown into this book that you could not comprehend it all in 300 pages or however long this book was. The characters, as a result of all this world building, kind of just fell by the wayside. It feels like the author really was building up this world and these kind of gods and stuff like that, and wasn't really thinking about the fact that the characters need to have personalities. I can't think of a kinder way to put it. The writing is certainly very beautiful, and the vibes are there. The vibes are gorgeous, but it just didn't work for me. It was a 2.5 star read, sadly. The first 3-star read that I had was my only classic of the month, and that was Dubliners by James Joyce. I'm laughing because this is the first James Joyce book that I've ever read, and I went into this completely blind. Bear in mind, I'm not really a classics girly. My favourite classics are more the softer ones, for a better way of putting it. Little Women, Pride and Prejudice, Emma, A Little Princess, The Secret Garden. So James Joyce is very different, and while I know a little bit about Ulysses, I went into Dubliners knowing absolutely nothing about the plot. I kind of went into it knowing that this one's probably best to read before Ulysses because of how massive Ulysses is. It's probably better to acquaint myself with James Joyce's writing through Dubliners first, but I really should have looked up a synopsis because I did not realise that this is actually a collection of short stories. So I read the first 5 chapters, absolutely baffled, not knowing what was going on, who these people were, why none of the characters from the first few chapters had not come back into it. So after about 50 pages, I want to say, I finally looked up a synopsis and then realised that it is short stories, and I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more if I'd known that going in and I hadn't been so confused. So that's my own fault. I actually found James Joyce's writing to be fairly easy to read. I read this in like 2 days, which for a classic, even a small one, would normally take me a little bit longer. I'd normally kind of struggle a little bit more. So I actually found his writing surprisingly easy to read, although I can't say that I fully understood much of what I was reading. The second 3-star read that I had was The Last Love Song by Kaylee Holford. This is a YA contemporary and it's kind of Mamma Mia inspired. So I was really looking forward to this because I love anything to do with Mamma Mia. What I will say is that it doesn't have quite the magic of Mamma Mia, which I suppose is an unfair judgment because nothing can, really. Not for me anyway. But I did go into it kind of expecting to be more emotionally wrought by the book because the girl's mother in this has passed away and she's kind of going on this treasure hunt, which is her last present from her mother, to work out who her dad is, to find out about her mum's life when they were the same age. And I was kind of expecting it to be a lot more emotional than I found it to be. I think that largely the reason it felt much less emotional than I was expecting was because Mia, the main character, feels very disconnected from her mother, despite the fact that we do get flashbacks into the mother's life as a teenager, which I really appreciated. I really liked that we got to see her perspective. It still felt very disconnected because Mia doesn't have any memories of her mum. I'm not sure how old she was when her mum passed away, but she doesn't have like any memories of her at all. She cannot even remember really what she looks like, and that just made it feel quite disconnected because we don't really have any memories of Mia and her mum together, so it didn't really have that kind of gut punch that I was expecting from a Mamma Mia inspired story. And especially considering that her mum is a famous singer, or was a famous singer, I found it a little bit hard to suspend my disbelief that Mia did not once Google her mum in 18 years. Like, she didn't even know how her mum had died. Did she really not Google her? Not once? Did her grandmothers really not ever tell her how her mum died? I just found it a little bit unbelievable, that part of the story. So it was a 3-star read. Not a bad book, but just didn't really work for me. And now into 3.5-star reads. So we started off with Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. This is an adult romance and it follows Opal, who has just won 500,000 on the lottery, and she is being kind of approached by everyone in her life to give them handouts, and she decides to go and buy a flower farm. Why wouldn't you? And she buys this flower farm, but when she gets there, she discovers that the granddaughter of the woman who owned the farm, who's passed away, is still living there, did not know it had been sold by her mum, and it's her home, it's her job. So Opal decides to let Pepper, the other woman, continue to live there, continue to work there until she can pay her back and buy the flower farm off of her. Of course, they end up with a bit of romance going on. And honestly, the flower farm was like the perfect setting for a romance book. It just created such good vibes, like with all of the kind of greenery, the greenhouses, and the little competition they had going on to build this, like, I don't even know what it was, like sculpture out of flowers. I really, really liked the vibes. However, I do think that I didn't really like the chemistry between Pepper and Opal. I didn't really feel it. It feels like their feelings for each other came on very, very suddenly, kind of out of the blue, and I definitely would have preferred for there to have been a bit more of a build-up. They kind of went from not really liking each other to really liking each other in 0.5 seconds, so I would have preferred a bit more of a build-up to that. However, it was really easy to read and get into, and I also really appreciated the neurodiversity representation of autism and ADHD. I think that that was really done well, and there was also some anxiety representation as well, which I really appreciated too. So again, I liked it, it just wasn't quite what I was wanting from it. And the other 3.5 star read that I had was Moonstone by Laura Purcell. I do have a physical copy of this, but I've left it at work by accident, so we'll just put a picture here. This is a YA paranormal fantasy romance kind of thing. It follows a girl called Camille. It's set in like Regency era, and she commits a social faux pas and is sent off to live with her godmother in the woods. Her godmother has a daughter who is afflicted by a very strange illness, and kind of goes from there. I really, really like this for the first sort of 2/3 of the book. I felt like the vibes were there. I really liked the kind of slow pacing where we were really getting into the atmosphere and into the werewolf side of things, because there are werewolves. And there's an eerie woods, there's an isolated farmhouse, it's very atmospheric. But it got to the last third of the book, and that was kind of where it went wrong for me, because we had this really great build up, but it felt like the climax of the book was just done. Like, it was just like, oh, we need to end the book, we need to end it. Like, the book's being published tomorrow, we don't have an ending, just end it anyway. It didn't feel like it had really been planned out, which is such a shame, because I've met the author, we did an event with her at the shop, and she is so, so lovely. So the fact that I didn't really like the ending was really sad, but the book is only sort of 270-ish pages, and I think I got to 6 pages before the end, and the kind of whole big climax of the book hadn't happened yet, and I was sort of thinking, oh, is there going to be a sequel? Because how are we going to wrap this up in 6 pages? And somehow we did. It just felt too easy, and I don't want a book that has such great atmosphere and had me really captivated for the first, like, majority of the book to be having an easy ending, if that makes sense. So it was slightly disappointing in the end. And now we're getting into the 4-star reads. So the first of which this month was Café con Lychee by Emery Lee. This is a YA contemporary, and it's following 2 boys, Gabe and Theo, and they are the sons of rival cafe owners. So Theo's parents own a bubble tea shop and Gabe's parents own a Puerto Rican cafe, and they are rivals in their little town, and both their businesses are actually kind of going under. There's a new fusion cafe that's opened up, and it's threatening both of their livelihoods. So Theo and Gabe kind of come up with a plan to save both of the businesses, even though they hate each other. So it was really easy to read. I had a really good time reading this, actually. It was cute, it was fun. Theo and Gabe were really distinctive characters in their own right. I really liked seeing how their characters developed throughout the book, and also how there was ADHD representation, anxiety representation. While some of the conflicts maybe felt a little bit underwhelming, all the food in here made up for it. I was starving reading this book, honestly. So if you're looking for a really fun, quick, easy YA read, I would really recommend this. Also absolutely perfect for summer. I mean, you can tell that just from the stunning cover. The next 4-star read that I had was The Worst Ronin by Maggie Tokuda Hall, and honestly I don't even know how to explain what this book is about. It's basically about a pair of female samurai who join forces in order to defeat this beast, I think. The synopsis says that it's about a run-of-the-mill quest for glory and revenge turns into something more complicated, fighting actual demons, and I liked it. It was very funny. It was very, very funny. There were a lot of moments where I was laughing out loud. However, I was a little bit confused because this book is involving samurai. They're riding around on horses, there's wagons, etc. But then they have phones and TV and the news. And I was just like, why? I don't really know why we needed to include that in here. I mean, you know, it made it funnier, I guess, but it was really confusing and I just don't think it added that much to the story. So I'm not sure why we had that in there. But anyway, the characters were very sweet and very genuine, and I liked that we had a kind of undercurrent of grief running throughout the book, added a good emotional depth. It just wasn't exactly what I was expecting with the whole phones thing going on. And the next 4-star read that I had was To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chang. This is, I don't know if it was YA or adult fantasy, I can't remember what I classed it as, but it's fantasy. And it follows a girl whose world has been conquered by the Romans. The Romans have come over from our world with all sorts of technology that this world was not seen before, and they have conquered them. And she wants to protect her family, but there's kind of a sort of moral dilemma going on for her between protecting her family versus protecting her country, and I really liked that aspect to it. I think that this book had gotten a lot of slack. It was really hit by the review bombing sort of incident that happened last year, and I think that from that it has gotten a lot of bad press. It didn't need to be. I've seen so many people saying that this is a colonizer romance, that it's promoting colonization and like toxic relationships and stuff, and it's not at all. It's not a colonizer romance whatsoever. There is the slightest hint of attraction between our main character and the prince, but our main character is far more focused on her own goals and protecting herself and her family than on any romance. So it's definitely not a colonizer romance by any stretch of the imagination. So I feel like that's a really unfair judgment that a lot of people have been making about it. The point of the story is the main character having to choose between herself and her family or her country, and I feel like that was a really, really great choice to kind of include in the book, to kind of talk about. I feel like that made it really interesting, so I had a good time. It was well written, and while it might have been a little bit repetitive at times, I'm really looking forward to the sequel. And the final 4-star read that I had was Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Su Lin Tan. This is the absolutely stunning Fairy Loot edition, and this is a novella of sort of collection of short stories set in the world of Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and this is such a beautiful book and a beautiful send-off to the series, assuming that there's not going to be any more books set in this world. And what I really like about this book, actually, quickly, is that all of the author's personal proceeds are going to charity, so that is a really great cause to buy this book. But it's just such a beautiful world, and what I really love about Tales of the Celestial Kingdom is that it just kind of filled out the world a little bit. We just had these cute little snippets set sort of before the duology, during and after, and I just really loved that we kind of got like a sort of proper wrap up to the series. It was just really cute. I just really liked it. I love Su Lin Tan, and this also had really gorgeous illustrations in. Like, is absolutely so beautiful. So I'm very pleased to have read this, and it was really quick and easy to read because it was only like 150 pages, I want to say. It was very, very short. Yeah, about 150 pages, so nice, quick, easy read. And now into the 4.5-star reads, the first of which was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the third book in the Dubliners series, which is a YA classic fantasy series set in 1920s New York, following a group of young people who have extraordinary powers. In the first book there was kind of a murder mystery aspect, in the second book it was kind of more ghosts and stuff, and this one was really about bringing out the overarching plot of the whole series, and I loved it. This was probably, apart from the first book, probably my favourite in the series so far. I had a really good time. The ending had me shook. I was not okay after reading that ending. I was not expecting that at all, and I was just it was far more brutal than I would expect of a YA fantasy. It was really surprising to me how the author decided to end this book, so I really enjoyed it. It's very hard to talk about this book obviously without spoiling the whole series, but I love the characters. The characters are so great in this, and they all really start coming into their own even more so, and there is a kind of like asylum set on this island. It was really creepy and atmospheric. I love the author's writing style. Just such a great series. If you haven't read the Dubliners series yet, I would really highly recommend you do so. I am itching to read the final book, although I'll be so sad to leave this world and these characters behind. And the other 4.5 star read that I had was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. I read this because it was going to be a Waterstones sci-fi fantasy book of the month for June, which it now is, so obviously I can tell you guys that. But I had a great time. I was actually kind of obsessed with this. It's set in a world where humans are little more than livestock because there are vampires. Vampires kind of rule the world, and our main character Aurea is the adopted daughter of the vampire king, and she enters into this legendary tournament that's held every century by the goddess of death herself, and whoever wins this tournament is granted a wish, and Aurea wants to use this wish in order to find her true family, and there's a mysterious ally that she has to make in order to survive. Being a fantasy romance, you can kind of guess what's going to happen. But I just really love this. I love that we had vampires in this, even if they were essentially just fae, but fae who drink blood. And it was just a great read. It's really easy to immerse myself in the world. I really like the world building. I'm really excited to see how that kind of develops as the series goes on. I feel like this series is going to be kind of made up of different duologies. So you've got this one, which is a Nightborn duet. So it's this, and the second book is The Ashes and the Starcursed King. But then there's been a third one that's been announced, which is the start of a new duology. I can't remember what that one's called. But that one is following a side character from this book, which I'm really excited to see her story play out. But honestly, the romance was so good. The slow burn was so good and so satisfying, and the plot that was going on was kind of like keeping the angst level up, which we love to see in a fantasy romance. I was just obsessed. I wasn't completely sold on the ending, which is why it's a 4.5 star read. Other than that, pick it up. Well worth reading. And finally, we are getting into our 5-star reads. So I think that I know what my favourite book of the month was, maybe, but I'm actually finding it really hard to pick between them. So I'm not entirely sure as of right this second, but we'll start off by talking about the first 5-star read, which actually wasn't the first 5-star read of the month, because I feel like my first 5-star read of the month is my favourite, so I'm going to talk about that last, if that makes sense. 5-star read was Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew. This is a horror book. I don't know if you'd class it as adult or YA. I can't remember what I classed it as, but it's like in the middle there. And it really reminded me of My Throat, An Open Grave. You're following Wyatt, who is visiting her family's property for the last time before she burns it down. Her father has just passed away and she's inherited it. And in the basement, she discovers Peter, who she was best friends with as a child, and it turns out that he's actually been ritualistically killed on this property hundreds of times, and he's kind of stuck in this cycle of life and death, and the only way he can break out is to kill the last living member of Wyatt's family, Wyatt. But also his cycle of regeneration is what keeps hell at bay. This farm, this property, is set at the mouth of hell, and there's demons and stuff in the woods. It was so good. I wasn't convinced for the first 50 pages whether I was going to like it, but then I sat down on a train for an hour and I sped through it. I got through like over 100 pages in an hour, and I was sat on this train with full-on chills all over my body from this book. It was so good. I don't even know how to explain it. It just scratched an itch, you know? The characters felt really real. I loved the writing style. I really, really want to read the author's first book, which I can't remember the name of. Is it like The Whispering Dark or something like that? Such a good book. Highly recommend. I was not expecting it to be a 5-star read at all, but boy was it. Then another 5-star read that I had was, and Violet, you'll be happy that this is a 5-star read. It was You Are Here by David Nichols. It's an adult contemporary, and it follows Marnie and Michael, who embark on a series of epic walks, and it was just so lovely. It was so lovely. David Nichols is hilarious. He's the author of One Day, absolutely devastating. But what I found with this book was that you really got across his sense of humour. It was hilarious. It was so funny. Very, very British humour. I'm not sure you'd really get it if you're American, but if you're a Brit, you'll get it. It was so funny. And it was a really wonderful look on human nature and relationships and loneliness. You know, you're following two people who are in their sort of late 30s, 40s, and the loneliness that comes with full-time work, being newly single or not newly single. It was so cute. The scenery was amazing. I loved the descriptions that David Nicholls wrote. If you love David Nicholls, you're going to love this. And if you just want a book that is just going to make you feel a bit better about life, pick this one up. And of course, a 5-star read goes to The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is obviously going to be a 5-star read. It really couldn't have been anything else. This is, oh my god, how big is this book? It was like 640-ish pages. But I loved every single second of it. This really showed to me how clever Brandon Sanderson is as a writer, because while I didn't fully understand what was going on in the world in sort of overarching world building, I feel like you're not meant to. You're not really meant to understand until you've read a few books in this series, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with discovering as I go through the books what is actually happening. But there was a moment in this book, and obviously if you've read it you'll know, I was like, wow, okay, so that's how it's going to be, Brandon Sanderson. You're going to act like that. So that makes me nervous for the rest of his books, because I was not expecting what happened to happen. And yeah, I'm really obsessed. You can really tell how Brandon Sanderson chooses every single little detail that goes into his books. Very, very clever man. And I loved it. I need to read more. I really need to read The Well of Ascension now. And I am really excited also to read Tress of the Emerald Sea. Is that a standalone? I don't know. I feel like that's a standalone set in the Cosmere. I've heard so many people saying that is just reads like a fairy tale, and I'm really excited to read that one. See how his writing style kind of differs across different series, different books. So very pleased to have read my very first Brandon Sanderson book. Then I had a 5-star read with Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was my very first Abby Jimenez book, and I am now an Abby Jimenez stan. I loved it. Very Emily Henry vibes, which if you know me, you know I need anything to do with Emily Henry because I've got to wait like a whole year for another one. But anyway, Abby Jimenez. In Just for the Summer, we're following Justin. Justin is a guy who everyone he dates, after they break up, they go on to find their soulmate. So he's kind of seen as like a good luck charm to date. And he comes across Emma, who has the exact same problem. And what they decide to do is they decide that they're going to date each other. And then once they break up, they'll be able to find their true loves. They'll like cancel each other out. They'll cancel the curse out. Obviously, there's chemistry between them. And I loved it. I was really not expecting to love this as much as I did. There is one scene in here one page in here rather, of Justin talking about Emma and talking about their relationship. It just hits. This book is really the definition of if he wanted to, he would. And I would highly recommend that all guys take notes from Justin. If you want to know what the kind of page was, you can go back and watch my vlog where I read this book, because I sort of read the quote out in there. I won't do it in this video because this video is far too long anyway. But it was so good. And I actually read this on NetGalley, but I had to go and get myself a physical copy. A, because it's stunning. B, because I loved it so much. And it's really a tie between this one and the next book as to which is my favourite book of the month. I can't decide. I just loved it. And I really feel if you have read Abby Jimenez before, you will be able to appreciate some of the Easter eggs that she puts into her books. I didn't really realise that there were going to be kind of clues, but it's kind of like in Emily Henry books. Emily Henry has little clues from her previous books in her next ones, so it's kind of like that. And I feel like I had a great reading experience with this one because I was not expecting the book to play out how it did. If you've read Abby Jimenez books before, you'll be able to kind of catch little Easter eggs, and it was so good. I just loved it. And the final 5-star read was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. A divisive book. This isn't going to be one for everybody. This is set during the Spanish Inquisition. It's an adult fantasy, kind of historical, and it's following Lucia, who is Jewish, and she has the power to kind of create like little miracles, and she's ends up being mentored for this competition for the king. And there's a bit of romance going on, and yeah, look, it's not going to be for everybody, but I love Leigh Bardugo and I loved this book. It was so good. I was obsessed with it. I knew from the first 20 pages that it was going to be a 5-star read, and my opinion of that did not change throughout the book. I really just think that historical settings suit Leigh Bardugo's writing style so well, and I really hope that we see more historical fantasies from her set during different time periods, because I love this. I love the setting. I felt really like I was there in this time in Spain, and it was a great book. It was really, really good. It was incredibly captivating, incredibly immersive, and I can't wait to see what comes next from Leigh Bardugo. I would genuinely read anything that she writes. I think that she is a true genius. So those were all the books that I read in May. As I said, I can't decide between Just for the Summer and The Familiar as to which was my favourite read of the month, but I had a great reading month. I really enjoyed all of the books that I read in May, so I'm very excited to see what my reading year is going to look like throughout the rest of the year, and hopefully I'll be able to read just as much in June. Do have some time off in June, so hopefully should be good. Let me know what your favourite read of May was, and let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. If you'd like to follow me on Goodreads or my Bookstagram, the links are down in the description. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!